I'm Professor Drew Stevenson, and this is an introductory welcome video for my administrative law course, which is an upper level elective. It's offered at most law schools. Also, the second half of a lot of legislation and regulation classes or statutory interpretation and regulation classes are essentially a stripped down version of administrative law. So you may find these video series useful for that course as well. So administrative law, what is administrative law? I tell people it's the body of law that government regulators, which in the popular culture is sometimes called the deep state or something like that, it's the body of law that government regulatory agencies have to follow when they are promulgating new regulations, when they bring enforcement actions, or when vacancies are being filled. In other words, when can say the president hire and fire agency directors or appoint acting directors and so forth. So we have rules about that. We have statutes and other regulations, and we're going to learn about those. And the other area of this course is a body of law that the courts have created for how the courts are going to treat agencies when they're a party in litigation. So how much deference does the agency get from the courts? So for example, if the agency is a health and safety agency like the FDA or the EPA or OSHA or even a local health inspector, and they have a lot of scientific expertise, how much does the court defer to the expertise of the people within the agency as opposed to making their own decisions and judgments? So we have a body of case law about that. And then some things that are about procedural fairness when an agency is, say, conducting hearings. Now, a lot of people find this to be a very useful course. It's one of the law school courses. It's very useful in practice when you're a lawyer. So it can affect everything from things on the local level, like dealing with local health inspectors and permits and licenses, on the state level, dealing with, say, a workers' compensation board, or on the federal level, if you're dealing with the EPA or OSHA or the Federal Trade Commission, the Social Security Administration. If you do immigration law, our immigration services, our administrative agencies, and so forth. So there's a lot of ways in which you can end up using this in practice, either representing individuals or representing corporations. And that could be in litigation and hearings, or it could be just doing compliance work and filling out the right paperwork and the forms and the permits and knowing when to renew licenses and so forth. Now, for this course, we have two main kind of materials, required materials. One is one of these traditional law school casebooks, Administrative Law, the American Public Law System. I'm holding up the 7th edition, but the 8th edition is now available. The lead author is Jerry Mashaw. And why are we using a casebook? I don't use casebooks in all of my courses, but in this particular course, we have some cases that are so important, US Supreme Court cases, that we actually have a doctrine named after the case, like the Chevron doctrine, or State Farm, when we talk about the hard look doctrine and so forth. And so, in fact, for my students, I'll give you a list of a dozen or so cases that you need to know by name for the final exam. They're so important in terms of understanding this area of law that the cases matter. This isn't true of every course in law school. There's plenty of courses where we're just studying random state law cases that provide examples and so forth. But in administrative law, we have a lot of big rules that have been made by major US Supreme Court decisions. And I will tell you ahead of time, and then for my multiple choice midterm and final, those cases are fair game to ask you about by name. What was the holding? What's the rationale? What were the dissenting opinions, and so forth. The other thing that we use for this course are flashcards. And that's because there's a lot of details about this in this area of law. Some minutia, rules and exceptions to rules and exceptions to the exceptions. And the flashcards are one of the most effective ways to kind of drill on the mechanics of administrative law. Now, I wrote those flashcards, and they are very reflective of the way I write exam questions. So my students who spend a lot of time mastering those flashcards get a big payoff on my tests and exams for my course, because they see a lot of questions that look very familiar. So don't neglect the flashcards. They will really give you a payoff on my final exam. Okay, so that's our basic introduction to the course, and we're going to start the course by talking about a little bit of the history and the way that the legislative branch creates and tries to control agencies that end up parked within the executive branch.